got my bachelor, my alma mater, right? So I'm bachelor's degree and a master's degree at Idaho State University in biology, and then I got a PhD in quantitative biology from the University of Texas at Arlington in Dallas Fort Worth.
And what made you want to study biology?
I just have always loved life, and I'm good at science anyway, but life is more complex and it's interesting. Always, ever since high school.
Did you always aim to become a professor, or did you?
No, I didn't. I actually didn't have an idea of becoming a professor until I was getting towards the end of my master's degree, and I had an opportunity to go to grad school, to continue school, do a PhD, and work on a research project in the Arctic, in the tundra, and I thought that was cool. So because I worked in Alaska for my master's degree, so I wanted to continue to go to Alaska. So my motives were like, I want to continue to go to Alaska, and I'll get a PhD. And then when that's done, I did some more research, and then, so it kind of worked out.
What kind of writing do you do while you were in college?
When I was in college, as an undergraduate,
Yes.
that was a long time ago. Probably a lot of different, I don't know, writing for classes. I've always written I've done a lot of writing, just as like free writing when I was younger in college. But then in graduate school, you start writing more technical science papers, and the more you write, the better you get. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes. Well, do you feel like you were a good writer?
Now I feel like I'm a far better writer than ever before, but it's only because I write a lot. So I write a lot for the research that I do, both in trying to get money to do it, but also publishing the scientific results of the writing. And I write for fun sometimes too. So.
Well, you have fun.
Well, sure, why not?
I did that.
What do you think is your writing process? Like, how do you start, and then how do you end up with your final?
Well, usually what I'm writing is, writing for fun is writing for fun. It doesn't really matter, right? Because I'm not going to really show that to anybody. It's more for me than anybody else. But as far as professionally, there's a general format that we follow as far as how we write. And from a science publication perspective. And then so each part of a scientific paper will have sections to it, right? And the sections kind of are standalone more or less. And you might have like a paragraph structure that follows like story arcs, where you have like a topical sentence and then subsequent sentences that kind of lead off of that, and then the final sentence might be a wrap-up sentence that kind of brings it back to the topical sentence. And then you structure your paragraphs in a similar way. So the first paragraph is kind of like the big picture paragraph, and then you get into more detail, and then you pull it out in the end that arcs back to the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's any similarities between like science writing and like writing that you would do in like rhetoric and comp?
Well, I
any
think
English
one of
class?
the things that I think that should be emphasized in life, in writing, is that science writing in general is usually terrible. It's unreadable, and it's hard for even scientists to follow. And I think it's because even people who have a lot of education want to, there's just a tendency to make things far more complex than they need to be as far as sentence structure and vocabulary, and so the simpler way. So for example, so we had a scientific writing class when I was a master's student about 13 years ago maybe, and the book that we used was this little book called The Elements of Style by Strunk and White, which is, let's see, who was E.B. White wrote Charlotte's Web. And I can't remember who Strunk was, but anyway, it's like this thick, and it's this little like how to write, how to write well, and so it makes sense. And it's not like science writing; it's just like how to put together a sentence in order that people will understand it most clearly. Because the problem with science writing is it's not clear, and even writing in general isn't as clear as it could be.
So you say that in undergrad you wrote more for just class, and then
Yeah,
after that you
yeah.
changed. So in what ways did it change over time?
Well, I think it got better because it had to.
Mm.
Maybe it got worse first and then it got better. Because it tends to get worse as you go on in science education because you think you have to use big words and a lot of flowery language, and you end up not being clear. But then the more you write, the better you get. And the more you have other people read what you write and accept criticism. So you have to be able to say, when your friend says, I don't understand what this sentence means, you can't get mad. You have to just say, oh, well, why don't you understand it? Because I can read something that I wrote, and it's really, really difficult for me to like figure out why somebody else can't understand it, because it's what I wrote. And the other thing that is really helpful is like write something, just write, and don't like you have a blank page in front of you. That's the hardest thing. Just write, and write, and then put it away for a little while, day, 2 days, come back, and you're like, this makes no sense. And then you can edit it and make it a lot more sense. The more drafts that you have, the better the writing's gonna be.
Okay, and then I heard you say that you write to get money to so
Sure.
have you ever have any of your pieces like published?
Well, you don't really publish the right to get money. What I mean is like we'll write grants applications to funding agencies.
Oh, okay.
So like a funding agency will have like, well, we have like $100,000 and we'll give like, and you apply for that money. And so you basically have to write a detailed proposal describing how you're going to use that money, and then other people will do the same thing, and then they'll have a group of people review that and basically give the money to the person who has the best idea and the most clear vision about how to take that money and put it to best use.
Have you been successful in any of those?
A little bit, not as much as I wish, but it's very highly competitive. It's really competitive.
Just like scholarships, I guess.
Yeah.
What's the longest research paper you've ever written?
Written? Well, I mean, a PhD dissertation, 175 pages. That was my PhD dissertation. But that's like that's the PhD dissertation. I mean,
It has to be long, right?
well, it just has a lot to it. I mean, that would be it. But usually our papers are around, I don't know, 30 manuscript pages, and then by the time they're published, they're like 7. Well, 7 like single, in an article kind of magazine format. But.
What sorts of texts do students in your major or discipline typically read? Like, because we're all in the major biology, similar to it.
Well, you're gonna read textbooks type stuff now, but later on you'll read more scientific papers.
So for like biolab, because we're all in biolab too,
Yeah.
we have to write like an abstract about
Sure.
stuff. Like, will we read like things like that throughout our major,
Yeah.
just like that?
Yep.
Okay.
For
And
the rest of the time.
Yeah. This is like, also, how did you learn how to write these kinds of texts? Like, I know we're learning how to write like abstracts in biolab, but how did you learn? Did you just like have
Same way.
same way, just through the handbook thing?
Well, through labs and lab reports and write-ups from labs
And you just kept doing it and doing
Yeah,
it
you
to
just
get
keep doing
better.
it.
Did they ever have like a class for that? Like a
No.
specific...
Because it's hard.
No. I mean-
And writing that stuff is really hard.
Yeah, I know. It's not. Depends on who your instructor is. Yeah, there's not really a class per se.
You just have to keep
You just
practicing.
have to keep doing it, and like you're gonna write lab reports or a write up. You basically have to like plan on writing it and then putting it down and picking it back up, because the first effort's not gonna be very good. Promise. Because I've read.
Oh, we know.
I've read,
We know.
I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them across the last. Because I've taught lab too, here and elsewhere, and they're terrible. But because you've never done it before.
Yeah,
We're doing our first one, and whew, it's rough.
Yeah.
What kind of assistance do you give your students when they're writing in your class?
I don't have a lot of writing like in our 1307 class, but I have students write in the other classes that I have, and usually I don't give them too much assistance. I'll give them an outline of what I expect, and then I'll basically say, look, if you want to get it to me beforehand for me to edit and look at before you turn it in for a grade, that'd be cool. I would do that. I will do that for you. But a handful will do. The students will do that, but usually they don't.
Okay, so what do you feel are characteristics of good writing in the
Um,
biology area?
I don't know. Just good writing is good writing. Clarity. You should never use terms that you should never assume your audience understands
Everything.
technical terms.
So define terms.
Define terms. Yeah.